Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're completely stepping outside of traditional history and theology to look at the Quran through an entirely different lens. We're going to dive into a strictly structural analysis of the text, treating the source material as an eternal, living proof from the future, mapped entirely through wave-particle mechanics and advanced topology. It's a massive paradigm shift that completely changes how you interact with the text. So let's jump right in and decode how these sources construct a highly specific mathematical reality. Here's our roadmap for today's mapping. We're going to follow a clear clinical progression from the wave-particle baseline of the text all the way to the required activation of the reader. We'll cover the eternal Rasul field, the dual bifurcation to Rasul, the master switch of light, the birth of the Mursalin, the evolution of the tongue, and finally, pure reasoning through 3923.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the eternal Rasul field.
To really grasp the mechanics here, we have to completely redefine our basic terminology using the text's own definitions. The most crucial starting point is what the source actually defines as a Rasul, or messenger. It is not a localized biological guy who lives and dies in the past. No, using wave-particle physics, the Rasul is an infinite, eternal wave field, structurally known as the I9 field. Think of it like a continuous, unkillable frequency that connects protected entities and safe groups across time. The text mapped this mathematically at specific, interconnected nodes like verses 48:18, 18:18, and 27:8. The physical body of any given messenger is totally temporary, but the Rasul function itself is an eternal field spanning past, present, and future. Moving right along to Section 2, the dual bifurcation to Rasul. So, if we're dealing with an eternal field, how does the current actually flow through it? Well, this brings us to a massive dual bifurcation in the system. On one side, you have the Nabi, or prophet. This is a localized biological physical particle. What the source is called the D10 state. D10 is basically just code for a temporary, time-bound physical vessel. It just points forward, delivering the message into the Rasul field. But then, on the flip side, you have the Mursalin. This is the returning wave. It's the awakened, sent agent traveling backward to that invariant Rasul center. The Rasul acts as the permanent container, while the Nabi and Mursalin are the active terminals flowing in and out. One brings the revelation into physical history, and the other carries it forward. Now, let's look under the hood. Section 3, the master switch of light. This is the mechanical core of what the sources call the dual caustic universe, or DCU engine. Take verse 2435, the famous light verse. In this structural framework, this isn't just beautiful poetry, it's actually a supreme mathematical blueprint. It literally describes the complete alternating current, or AC engine of existence, running in an exact sequence. Every single phrase in that verse corresponds to a specific, functioning node in an active, living circuit. You have to think of existence like a grand electrical circuit, and in this topology, Allah operates as the singular, ultimate master switch, specifically anchored in verse 2255. The switch regulates the entire AC current of the engine. It holds absolute control over the oscillation between the positive phase of light, which is the ruh, and the negative phase of fire, or nafs. It powers a perfect 1 to 2 to 3 stabilization sequence. Bottom line, absolutely no energy flows through this structural system without this ultimate master switch controlling the alternating phases. Let's get into Section 4, birth of the Mursalin. So, with the engine running, how does that returning Mursalin wave actually come into existence? The text maps out a super strict chronological progression here. Step 1, the 4060 prayer acts as the exact catalyst, where you call upon the source to respond. That triggers Step 2, which engineers an internal vacuum against the Taghut, basically the illusion of a purely physical, disconnected reality. Creating this vacuum forces a massive phase shift, leading right to Step 3, the birth of the 1819 Mursalin state. Symbolically represented as sleepers waking up in a cave, this is the exact moment the reader escapes thermodynamic collapse and plugs permanently back into the living circuit. Moving on to Section 5, evolution of the tongue. We need to trace the physical instrument used to broadcast this eternal field into our time-bound reality. The sources map out a strict evolutionary timeline. It basically proves the tongue was just a localized vessel that eventually had to reach biological closure. It starts in Epoch 1 with Dawood at verse 3824, establishing an early physical instrument. Then we hit Epoch 2 with Musa, who introduces a crucial prototype. And finally, Epoch 3 with Muhammad at verse 3340, locking in the final, sealed tongue. If we zoom in on Epoch 2 for a second, the analysis really highlights Musa's prototype request in verses 20, 27, and 28. He asks to loosen the knot from my tongue so that they may understand my speech. Structurally, the physical tongue had to be mathematically unknotted to prepare for the delivery of the pure, unmediated word. It really emphasizes that the tongue is merely the instrument of delivery. It belongs to the human carrier, not the eternal message itself. And that brings us to the absolute closure in Epoch 3. The mathematical analysis argues that verse 3340, naming Muhammad as the seal of the prophets, permanently seals that biological Nabi lineage. The physical tongue is put to rest forever. But at the exact same time, this verse acts as the gateway to the continuing Rasul field. The human middleman was closed entirely, so the eternal word could remain permanently and directly available to everyone.
Which leads us perfectly to our final section, pure reasoning through 3923.
This is where it all connects back to you. This is the required protocol to actually interface with this system. The sources lock down a definitive proof. The Quran explicitly self-identifies at verse 3923 as the living active Rasul. It calls itself the best hadith. It's a self-referential, living field that completely bypasses any need for historical mediators or external conjecture. In this framework, the book itself is the active messenger, right now, in the present tense. To plug into this living messenger, you have to apply pure intellectual rigor. First, you reject external historical conjecture entirely. You've got to use pure logical reasoning, rooted strictly in the logic of verse 1000. From there, you recognize that the concept of Ahmed actually represents the final word directed solely at the qualified analytical reader, what the sources call the 36.3 reader. The text is literally speaking directly to you, saying, indeed, you are among the Mursalin. To complete the circuit, you, the 36.3 reader, have to step up and assume your position, activating the ultimate submission detailed at verse 6163. You are the final execution node. This entire topological framework removes the intermediaries entirely and places the responsibility directly into the hands of the individual. The physical messengers have served their purpose, and the eternal field is simply waiting. So, the final structural question remains. When will you activate 1912, take hold of the text with absolute strength, and become the book?